Whenever feasible, one should always try to eat the root. Would you join me at the table?
Welcome to Eat the Rudecast, an unauthorized podcast about NBC's Hannibal and the works of Thomas Harris. I'm Cooper, and I have with me...
Hi, this is Miko.
And this is Ophelia.
And I've already forgotten how to pronounce the title of tonight's episode. If. Which I mispronounced at the end of last week's episode. Tonight we are drinking a late harvest Riesling from Hogue, which is a Washington vineyard. And I thought it appropriate since this is the episode that takes us from fall to winter. Mm-hmm. Ophelia apparently is not crazy about this episode.
No,
she's underwhelmed.
She's actually, throughout the prep for today's podcast, been getting angrier and angrier about the episode.
A little bit, just because it's unimpressive, and I've been so impressed.
Well, before we get to that,
this.
We need to talk about the big issue with this episode.
Okay.
Which is that it didn't air.
Ah,
yes.
Right.
So, season 1 of Hannibal coincided with two rather horrific events. The Sandy Hook Elementary School murders and the Boston Marathon bombing. And If was due to air right when the Boston Marathon bombing happened. And it's about kids murdering people. Mm-hmm. And so Brian Fuller pulled it voluntarily. NBC didn't tell him he had to. He pulled it saying he just didn't feel that this episode had a place in that world, in that time.
Yeah.
The issue with that is there's a whole lot of character stuff here that happens. Mm-hmm. Most, especially between Hannibal and Abigail, and we'll go into this more, but it's a lot of character stuff. And so to just pull the episode entirely creates a massive hole in your character development.
Yes.
So what they did is they edited all the Killer of the Week stuff out, which is the children killing people, and put together webisodes. And if we know anything about the internet and mainstream America, nobody watches webisodes.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to go to the internet to say, okay, I need to catch up on my character development here.
Yeah. Especially your average viewer. Yeah. I mean, that's really niche. Those are people who, do that stuff all the time.
Like us.
Yeah, like us. Yeah, like we would do that.
Yeah.
But a vast majority
we would track down this episode saying,
don't take it away.
Channels,
exactly.
Knowing that, oh my God, I can't see this because it aired outside the country.
Oh, because they weren't having the issues we were having.
No, they don't seem to have those issues that we have.
Another podcast.
Nearly as much. Yes. We will not go into that on tonight's podcast.
We are trying to keep this to an hour.
Right.
And we still can't without this.
We can't.
Nope.
So, Ophelia did not like this episode.
Okay.
Let's start with that.
I like the way they have the character development between Hannibal and Abigail. I like their interaction. And I like the scene at the end with the coming together of that development, which we'll get into in more detail. But the rest of the episode felt like Law and Order.
Yeah. The procedural part of the episode, I think, is what you were really unhappy with.
Sterile.
Because the character development parts were really interesting. But the rest of it was, I don't want to say very well thought out. It just wasn't as interesting as the other Killer of the Weeks.
Well, the episode, the series so far is a little scattered. It's not certain what it wants to be. I feel like season 1 had a lot of material, but not enough to fully fill season 1 without adding the CBS-like procedural aspect of it. And I think that's why, so we've had episode 2 and 4 that focus on Killer of the Week, and episodes 1 and 3 that focus on mythology building. But right off, we see in this episode the schizo nature of that, because they seem to desperately want to be about the mythology, and this is where we transition. You know, the mushroom killer was sort of metaphorical, The child killer and family aspect is 100% metaphorical.
In your face.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about it. You don't have to interpret it. There's no art.
So in this episode, we're starting to feel the desperation, the pull of the showrunners saying, okay, we really want it to be more about Hannibal, Abigail Hobbs, Will, that relationship. That's what we want. But I think we may have sold it to NBC as being sort of like CSI meets the Hannibal Lecter series. Because that's what this episode feels like. You say Law and Order. I didn't watch a whole lot of Law and Order. But the fact that we came back to the Lab Geeks, and I love the Lab Geeks.
I do.
But we spent more time with the Lab Geeks. Like, there are a lot of scenes.
There's a lot
in this
more,
episode.
Yeah. There's a lot.
And so we would spend a minute or 3 minutes here with the Lab Geeks as they're putting together the crime in progress. And maybe that's part of what it is we've never seen a crime in progress before.
No, that's what I was saying before with the mushroom killer before. It wasn't them in the process of finding new victims. There was the one set of victims. They knew that he would strike again.
Except for Gretchen Speck Horowitz.
Oh, that's
yes.
She lost the hyphen.
She lost the hyphen. Exactly. Yeah. But that was the catching moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, she had already become a victim, but we didn't then have to wait for another victim and then another victim in order to get all the evidence they needed to figure out where this guy was. They did it in the process of the first killings, and then a lot of the procedural stuff happened off camera. You would kind of come back and it would be sort of like, they figured this out, or you're at a location and the only reason why you know why is not because, the tech guys were in a room talking about it for 20 minutes. It would just be, they figured this out and this is where this has to be.
Right.
Whereas we saw several killings, happen. And then we saw the killers, which we haven't really seen before. Our mushroom guy was only exposed at the end of the episode.
Right.
We saw bits and pieces of him. We were hinted at, a little behind the head, a little. They came straight out with it.
Yeah. Well, in this episode, you remember we met Hannibal 20 minutes into the episode, 21 minutes specifically. We met Molly Shannon's killer mother.
Was creepy.
21 minutes into the episode.
Yeah.
And Molly Shannon did a really nice job.
Did. Absolutely.
And I think this story would be interesting anywhere else.
Yeah.
But it's not nearly as interesting as the other stuff they're doing. And so every moment we spend with Molly Shannon and the kids in a gas station, that is CSI stuff. That stuff would be great on CSI with
Law and Order.
With Will Graham Light, William Peterson playing Gil Grissom, who, come on, really, that is an extension of the Manhunter version of Will Graham. Gil Grissom is Will Graham on CSI.
At least, because we're coming into season 1, we know where this is a successful show and it's going to be fine. What's interesting about this...
Well, it's a successful show, and I'm using air quotes on podcast.
It's got a season 3. It could never have made this far.
Miko, you have a better position than we had at this point in the series.
We had no idea.
That's what I'm saying.
We kept feeling, oh my God, they're going to
We thought, there's no way in hell they're going to keep this on. Then season 2, there's no way in hell they're going to keep this on. And now we have season 3. So yes, at the very least.
That's what's nice about looking at this right now with the benefit of knowing, yes, we have a season 3.
Yeah.
Choices like this that were made did not kill it. Because because when you do this, when you combine the procedural with another storyline that's just as fascinating, and you don't give the people what they want, you kill the show, because Numbers did that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. What was wonderful about Numbers was not just the FBI stuff, because that was actually kind of boring. What was great was the math that was being done and those characters.
Right. And that's why you're tuning in, because it's new.
Yeah.
I wanted to see
CSI.
the two professors battling back and forth with their little nitpicky anal retentiveness.
For that on every episode. I could fast forward through all the FBI stuff I wanted all the math professor stuff and all, when you would sit there and have, the moment which is actually kind of Will-like, in which he would have a vision.
Yes,
and he would see everything. And then successful seasons, great show. And then suddenly a producer decided, we need more FBI stuff because all the CSI stuff is really popular. Killed it in the middle of the last season. Like they pulled the plug on the show because people weren't watching it.
Yet another thing to blame on CSI.
Well, so it's nice to know that they did this. We didn't like it, but it's still going
grows
strong.
throughout its run. From what I've heard of season 3, it's going to dramatically change again. It's a show that's not afraid to evolve, which is very unique for network television.
Yes.
I mean, it's very unique for television in general.
Yeah.
Keep
Season 2 is dramatically different from Season 1. Season 3 sounds like it's going to be a completely new show from Season 2. So, I love seeing this, knowing what I know about the series, and knowing about where it's going. I love seeing the growing pains of it. We're in its awkward stages.
Awkward stage.
It's not sure what it wants to be, but it knows it wants to be something special. It knows it wants to be something different. And we see that a lot. One of the things I do want to mention, and I know you were not crazy about the episode, but Jennifer Schur, the writer, seems to have gotten what becomes the signature Hannibal dialogue.
Yes.
The back and forth, the metaphorically written sentences that just go back and forth, and it's just like they're all speaking in poetry. Yeah. And we really start to see that in this episode, because this is the episode where Will really begins therapy with Hannibal.
Okay. Yes.
And we open with Will in therapy, and it has this beautiful image. Will talks about leaving his house in Wolf Trap, Virginia, in the middle of the night, and walking out in the field with his dogs, and looking back at his house and seeing it all lit up, and feeling safe. And the house is like a boat on the ocean, which at once pulls in Will being a boat guy, and later in the episode, it's mentioned that his father fixed boat motors, which is Will's occupation before Jack Crawford jumps in Red Dragon. But what really struck me is Will feels most safe and most at home when he's looking in on his life from the outside.
And not when he's in it, exactly.
And it's this detachment he wants, and this attachment that makes him feel like it's okay.
Comfortable.
Yeah. And it's very much his interaction with the world, and it has a lot to do with the way his mind works and how he has this sort of Asperger's-like disconnection with people. He can read them very clearly, unlike people with spectrum disorder, but he can't connect with them the way people do naturally. So to be able to look in from afar is probably such a safe place for him, because when he's in the world, every bit of it is uncomfortable. Every interaction with every human being is too much for him. He doesn't look anybody in the eye. He doesn't really touch anybody. He's trying to remain isolated, a single boat on the sea, in everyday life. And it's really hard to do. And especially when you're drawn into this world.
And it's not like he's being asked to observe
normal
people and comment on normal people. He's being asked to look in and observe and to kind of spy on the way he was looking and feeling comfortable with his own home into the most demented minds.
Exactly.
And try to figure them out. Because nobody else can.
And this one, was interesting because we talk about Will's family life and what he feels is family. And we get a little hint from Hannibal. We've already been going through this with Abigail.
Oh, yeah.
A line that really, really stood out for me was Will saying, "Past the slides and vials, beyond the lines of the police report, between the pixels of all those printed faces of sad dead girls."
Yeah,
this is like everything going forward. This is what Hannibal sounds like. This is what this show sounds like. And part of it is fed from Thomas Harris, but not so much. Thomas Harris is, we've mentioned, a very utilitarian writer, not a very flourishy writer.
No.
But the show has just gone down. They've taken every little bit of flourish from Thomas Harris, like the floating on motes of dust from the last episode, and they've taken that and elevated all the conversation to it. So now when we see Will and Hannibal sit down, we know that this is what we're getting. This type of dialogue is what we're going to hear. And it's gorgeous
There's
stuff.
Poetry in every bit of dialogue. Every interaction. It's wonderful because you kind of wait for it to happen. And people will just say things that are so incredibly quotable and beautiful. And, like, they say so much without coming straight out and saying it. Around that time, he does they asked him how he's still thinking of himself as in The Killer. Yeah, and Hannibal asks him, what does it feel like? It's like we're doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, even after he was dead.
Even after he was dead, that they're getting up in the morning and doing the same thing, and they're leaving the house and they're having breakfast. They're like, he is that person at the very same time.
And it gives us more information from a period that was sort of glossed over in the first episode, which is cool. We're not just being re-fed this information. We're seeing how Will lived with Garrett Jacob Hobbs in the maybe, 5 or 10 minutes there, that we're getting that now, which is very cool.
Yeah, we're delving into that. But then he asks him, well, do you feel, do you think you are him? And he was like, I know who I am.
Yeah.
I am not him.
Yeah.
And there's just these sort of
defensive
moments of dialogue that are
he's
deep.
Extremely defensive.
Yeah.
Yes. Because Hannibal is implying, but also what's interesting is that conversation starts by talking about Marissa Shore, the antler death at the end, which was very much not Garrett Jacob Hobbs, which was Hannibal. And so Will talking about doing the same things at the same time of day. Will has eaten breakfast with Hannibal. Will has had that little protein scramble with Hannibal. And so he's done the stuff with the killer at the same time of day. Which is lovely.
Well, there is, like I said, it's very poetic in the things that they say. Simple things have deep meanings. Or things that don't come straight out. We'll be quoting more of them as we move on.
And Hannibal, this is from the knowledge of what has come. Hannibal sees Will in him.
Yes,
he sees their connection, and really it's starting to ramp up. So when Hannibal says, like you were becoming him, and Will gets all defensive about Garrett Jacob Hobbs, I feel like Hannibal is talking about himself.
Becoming
because
me.
You are like me. And Hannibal really is a lonely man who's desperate for a friend. And Will is that friend. Will is that family. And that's really what we get at in this episode. Will represents that.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. That's why it's so interesting that this is such... The one episode we didn't see is all about family.
Yeah.
Because I think it says a lot more about all the characters in this one episode than we have so far. And I don't know if we will ever be able to do this again. Because it's so interesting to go from the whole beginning part of this episode is all the interaction between Hannibal and Will.
Yeah.
And we do it for a really long time. And we talk about how he's processing this
And
thing.
we get to spend that time in the beautiful... Hannibal therapy office.
Exactly.
The greatest office in the history of television.
Everybody wants that office. I want a room with a balcony and those beautiful arches.
The curtains. The curtains.
And you and those curtains.
Red and gray curtains. Oh my God.
We need to find those curtains.
We could just make it.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. We don't have windows in the room that we hang out in, but there's a wall over there that we can hang some curtains on.
We can very easily take a screen.
Each door.
Yeah. You take a picture frame like this, you make it into a window, and you put
Or we can have curtains that go over there.
Exactly. There's a place. We'll find a place to satisfy this itch you
have.
Even
if they're just miniature
I need it.
But and then here we.
I need.
Give me. I need.
Yeah. And then we're assaulted by the death of this family.
Yes.
The first family is not like a slow build.
No, and we move right into Will doing a reversal.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's the first image we get is maggots at dinner.
Yes.
So maggots invading food, and food is such a a major...
It was a gag-worthy...
Yeah, totally.
Because it wasn't just like, ooh, a couple. They wanted to let you know that those people had been dead a long time. There were flies and maggots and the dead, decayed look of all the food.
I liked when they went back in reverse.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that because I'm noticing more and more as we do these, the pendulum scenes. Mm-hmm. This time, really, I feel like I have just reread Silence of the Lambs. And in it, they talk about Hannibal being able to slow his heart rate with basically like the metronome of music. So he listens to Goldberg variations and he slows it down. So during a big scene in Silence of the Lambs, when Hannibal needs to be able to be completely in control of his faculties, he can slow down time essentially
that also
to watch
comes up
it.
In this episode,
it does.
Between heartbeats.
We feel like. I feel like the thrumming that we hear in the pendulum scenes, it's very much like a heartbeat in reverse because it pulls instead of hitting. It's vroom, 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 which is what a heartbeat would sound like in reverse. And then there's also this weird little at the same time, which is something that we've used a number of times going through the scene here. You mentioned...
Yes, when the blood reversed from the table back into the heads of the victims.
Off the picture.
No, they do it on the table first.
It comes off the table.
Yeah.
When I first heard it, it was off the tablecloth.
Yeah.
It's the sound of a woman's scream, like a long, drawn-out scream, but played in reverse. It's this very strange backwards music moment when they do this reversal screen.
And you see all the pools.
Or scene. This reversal scene.
They get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you start seeing then the food reverses, and then you start seeing the splatter come off the
family pictures
in reverse. And then we go back to just the family standing there. And that is when Will is sitting at the table.
And that really creepy scene with Mother
rigid.
Staring at him.
Yeah.
This is worth mentioning. I didn't know this until we're recording this the weekend of the San Diego Comic-Con. So there's been the Season 3 Pannibal, where I learned a whole lot of things. The most exciting thing that I learned, though, is David Slade, the director of Episode 1 and 3, also does the sound design, supervises the sound design for every episode of the series. So he is he's focused on sound the way I haven't seen since David Lynch.
I was thinking the same thing during this episode. That specifically in the past 2 episodes, sound is starting to really stand out to me. And I think it was the last episode. I was like, this is sound design.
The sound design was tremendous.
That is very Lynchian. Yeah. And again, I appreciated it because that meant detail. Mm-hmm. Someone is thinking about the layering because we have costumes that are very precise. We have colors. We have lens choices. We have filter choices. We have musical choices. We have sound design choices. There is not one iota of these episodes that is chance.
Yeah, everything is intentional.
All constructed to lead you, on this path that they want to take you down. And that's the thing. The sound design is incredible. Everything from the music to what happens in each, scene while things are going on. It's manipulating you.
Yes,
it is.
It really is.
All right, we have is it just me or has Will never been so pissed off during a walkthrough?
He was very...
Will was upset, and I don't know if it was Will was upset because he was embodying the character, or Will was upset because he was seeing the destruction of family, which is also something he craves but can't really connect with.
I think it may be the latter, only because as we get to know how he was sort of disconnected from his father, and it seems like his father was always busy working. They didn't seem to have, and he didn't seem to have any kind of warm family life growing up. So when he sits in that chair, here we have a perfect family. They're in a affluent neighborhood. This house is big and beautiful. Exactly. And he starts talking about how the table is set and the family dinner, something he probably may
I wasn't invited.
Never have had.
Was the line that really nailed it for me.
Yeah.
I
wasn't invited. And he's speaking from the point of view of the killer at this point, who we don't yet know. But like I said, it's metaphorical. We've gotten to the point where the actual killers don't matter, aside from how they affect our main characters.
Exactly. That's why I say this episode is so important, because we're learning. When he sits there and he talks about how he's at the head of the table, but the only problem is he is not the father figure at the head. He's like my seat. He's not invited, but it's his seat.
Yeah. He's the guest of honor.
Yeah, he's the guest of honor, and he's at his place next to the mother. You know, it's like it says here. It's like I'm the guest of. Nobody has taken a bite of their dinner. It's like, if you don't eat your growing foods, you won't get any dessert. And you see a very frightened
he's angry.
He slams his hand on the table there.
And he slams and he points at her. And at that moment, I'm like, are we channeling the killer? Or is this your
That's Will's personal trauma.
That is
family.
Not. This is,
and then this makes him especially angry because this is the perfect little nuclear family. This shouldn't be happening here, right. But something was happening here that was destroying.
Well, we're seeing the degeneration of Will. We're seeing what has been threatened in the first 3 episodes. You know, Alana is constantly talking to Jack about how she's concerned about Will getting too involved, too close. Will's talking about last time he got close, he brought something back. And broken. this is Will losing control of his skill, his talent, his superpower.
Yeah. What was the last thing he said?
He's also losing control of the restraint.
Yeah, because he says, I brought my own family to this home invasion, which is interesting when we get down about the concept of my own family.
Yeah.
Because it becomes constructed later on. So controlling the Turners with threats of violent threats. It's really saying that twice.
With threats of violence, threats that turn to action.
There should be there we go. We need a comma there.
Yeah. The Turner family is executed simultaneously with the exception of Mrs. Turner, who dies last. And there's that tremendously unsettling moment where Mrs. Turner is just staring at him, at Will, and knowing it, and this is his design. He shoots Mrs. Turner.
And we actually see him do it.
Yeah.
Yes,
so again, we're sitting, for an audience, we're sitting with a main character who we see murdering people and isn't. Which is so risky.
And so much of that is going to be deconstructed throughout this entire episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every bit of that whole discussion about family and wills, because we're going to talk about family with Hannibal, we're going to talk about family with Abigail, and then crazy Molly Shannon is going to have her version of family.
Oh, crazy Molly Shannon. But before we talk about crazy Molly Shannon...
we have a lot.
I wanted to add to the one thought that you had, that his anger was coming from not having had that kind of family, or having that kind of privilege to have a family that cared about.
These families are very affluent too.
Yes, affluent. They're all affluent families, kind of middle class, and all of the children have a slightly ADD or Asperger's syndrome, which obviously Will.
Because when Will was growing up, there was no diagnosis for ADD.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think it's like a jealous rage where he's...
That's what I was saying. Why did this killer come in and destroyed something that I always wanted and could never have? Someone destroyed this that someone else had.
If you take that his father fixed boat motors in Louisiana,
and jumped from place to place,
what his life was like. His father...
They were not affluent.
And he says that in one of the
he does say he was poor. We didn't have much. But it wasn't just that they were poor in money. It seems like they were poor in attention to Will when he was younger.
Well, they probably had no idea what to do with a child like Will Graham.
I feel like his parents probably wouldn't have been active in any sort of child's life. But it's especially hard to grow up in that environment when you do have a learning disability, or a disability that brings you farther away from humanity. So you can't even replace a father figure with a friend's father, or replace your mother with a friend's mother.
Because you have trouble connecting with anybody.
Connect with anybody, and you have the people who are supposed to show you how to do those things
exactly
are supposed to be
even
your
Hannibal
parents.
when he lost his family went to what was
An
it,
orphanage,
an orphanage. Then went to his was it an uncle?
And then an uncle when he was 16.
Yeah, we learned that in this episode, don't we?
Yes,
do
we learned
learn
that in this
later.
episode.
But I think I was just...
Which is the first call to the book Hannibal, where we start learning more
Yes.
about Hannibal's prior life, and then Hannibal Rising, where we really learn about.
Yes. So I was just thinking that it sounded like Will was transposing himself
That's what I was thinking
into the
too.
family and then just being pissed off that it was something that was destroyed because he could have easily grown
I
up
could have been happy
in
here.
yes, I could. Yes, thank you.
I could have been
Thank
I
you
could have
for-
been a more well-adjusted,
Could have been a contender.
kid,
I could have-
and then
yeah.
a more well-adjusted adult. He sees the failure that led him to who he is, which is helpful in moderation, but ultimately incredibly self-destructive, incredibly lonely, all these
It
things.
was like
that
somebody
Will
was
doesn't
taking
have.
these families and rubbing them in Will's face.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you can't have this, and now nobody can have this.
right. Now it doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. And it's an interesting road, too, of trying to figure out why this happens, because then we start looking at, when he starts thinking it's the children, we go down a road with that.
Oh, yeah.
And that also helps us to understand Will and Hannibal. And then we have the twist when he figures out, which is great that there's the long moment between him and the mother in the dinner table, because then when we find out later on,
We see why
we
there's
see
that moment.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But there's a lot that happens between
Yes.
those. Hannibal goes to Will's house.
Let's go back to Wolf Trap, Virginia,
Yes.
where Hannibal seemingly is
I thought he
breaking
was
into
sneaking. We
Will's
all
house.
thought he was
too.
sneaking
We're
in.
like, whoa.
We did.
Well, and I
Okay.
noticed right away, Miko. I know you're the costume guru over here, but I noticed right away that Hannibal, as he's coming into Will's house, first of all, he's pulling a length of sausages out of his blazer pocket.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, who, other than in a cartoon, has ever pulled a length of sausages out of a blazer pocket? But he's wearing Will's browns.
yes.
He's wearing Will's. I mean, his pants are the navy, not even navy, but a brighter blue. But he's wearing this checked brown, neutral earth tone. And I felt like, okay, so if we're going to take the idea that Hannibal is breaking into the house, maybe he's trying to confuse the dogs. Maybe he's trying. This is Hannibal's version of camo.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
It's
because
like,
that's kind of
look,
what it
I'm
looked
Will.
like. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
We're
if
the
anybody
same.
saw him wandering around the grounds,
Yeah, very true.
somebody, that's totally the way I was going with it. That I was like, oh, okay, so he's dressed out of character because he's here surreptitiously, and then everything about the way he stops and the scene, the whole thing's beautifully lit. Coming up with the car, the house looks kind of ominous and big with the vines crawling up the side, and then he goes and he passes the window that is sort of like it's this yellow tone to it, and he's looking, and again it's all Will's colors and that amber of the glass, and the dogs look up, and
They're excited Will's home. And
right, exactly.
Oh,
and
no,
then he
it's
opens
not
the
Will.
door, and even the way he's crushing the sausage between his fingers.
Yeah.
And not because
Snaps it.
if you're gonna give it, we have dogs. When you're giving a treat to a dog, we're like, oh, and you like, you're kind of cutting it. I mean, you kind of give it to them and you interact with them. He didn't even make
Hannibal
eye
has no
contact
interest
with them.
in
It
the
was
dog.
utilitarian.
It was utilitarian.
I must distract you
Yeah,
so that
I mean,
I can
It
investigate.
is worth mentioning. We're not going to dance around it like the show did, but it's worth mentioning that later Will points out that Hannibal was asked.
Yes.
To
to
do
go
this.
to
feed
do
the
this,
dog.
but we don't
over
find
him.
that out till like the end of the episode.
Right, so the
even
whole time we're like,
okay, so I've asked people to come over and feed my dog. Okay, Hannibal walks in, sits down at Will's fly fishing lure station.
Yes.
Finishes a
Finishes
fly
a
off.
fly.
And here's one of the reasons that I really can appreciate David Slade is in Twin Peaks, there was this sound that often accompanied the Black Lodge residents, where it sounds sort of like a finger circling around a water glass. It's just this cycling sound. While Hannibal is making this fly, we hear an almost identical cycling
I didn't
sound.
even realize that.
And I don't know if that's an intention. I imagine, because Brian
there
Fuller...
are homage moments.
Well,
yes.
at the Panable...
They mention
he specifically
Lynch.
says that David Lynch, David Cronenberg, and David Slade are Hannibal's influences. And David Slade being actively involved makes sense. We see a lot of David Cronenberg imagery, mostly in season 2. We get a lot more body horror as we
I'm
go.
a big Cronenberg fan.
But David Lynch is everywhere, and that really just stood out, that cycling sound to me.
It was so interesting to see that, again, it's that connection between Will and Hannibal. That Will has a hobby of making lures, which makes sense because it's a hyper-focused thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who are like that, it's great. They can lose themselves in the detail and how very careful you have to. So to have Hannibal come over and do it and then be so proud of his work. You know, afterwards he kind of like strokes it and it looks amazing.
Happy, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hannibal sits down at a fly fishing lure.
And creates a work of art.
It's a fly. It's not a lure, right? That's what it is. It's a fly. So, but yeah, he creates art, period. Yeah. I found it interesting, and I know we're doing something that we don't usually do, which is jumping around the episode. But later, Will was buying Abigail a present, it was a magnifying glass to make
it was
flies.
The same kit that he had.
It was his kit.
It's his kit.
And so we see it, we call back to it. Will is trying to lure killers. That's part of what he does. He catches the killer, and it's so dense.
Yeah, it is. But then also to call back and go, well, when Jack says, well, you thought better of it because they used to go hunting.
Yes.
Or
no, Hannibal says that.
Hannibal says that. Yeah, and he's like, well, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why he
because
didn't
give it to
Abigail and her father taught her how to hunt. Will may teach her how to fish. It's similar.
He realizes he's crossed
the line. The monstrous things Hannibal might teach her.
Exactly. But it is that the connection between the three of them happens a lot.
There's a part that really that happens here with the fly. That I don't like.
You know, and I wanted to make sure we covered that because I think collectively none of us understood it.
When he pricks his finger with the hook, that is not careful. That is DNA evidence.
He's curious how sharp it is. He wants to feel the pain. He wants to feel the agony. He wants to feel the deliciousness of the pain. I could see that being a Hannibal thing.
I don't see Hannibal as a masochist.
At the same time,
I really don't.
I agree with you. I feel like it's a writer's cheat.
Yes. It was unnecessary.
That was unnecessary and was not up to the caliber of the rest of the writing in the episode.
Yes. We could have cut it right when he ran his fingers across the top and that sort of
that was the Hannibal
pride
victory.
Of how beautiful it was. I thought they would cut right there.
Yeah.
Because that's where the cut should have been. That other stuff, that should have been unnecessary.
I mean, okay. So there's a couple of different things that I could sort of try to explain this into my brain and let it go. And it would be maybe he was thirsty for the taste of blood while being inside Will's home, where he has this deep connection to Will, where he wants Will to be his friend. He wants possibly Will to be becoming him, or at least revealing enough of himself to be like Hannibal, so that Hannibal can have him as a friend and not just a possible friend that he's sort of vetting over this long period of time. And he has this obsession with Will, which is clear later on, but you can see it developing in little ways. So to try to explain that, maybe being who he is, and even though we haven't seen him eat a person.
It's a lot of hinting.
We saw
it's all
later
hints.
In the episode. We see the.
We get a hint. We get a tease.
We see the rabbit.
But that's later.
That's later.
The rabbit that didn't get away.
That Jack and Hannibal are eating, putting in their mouths.
But it hasn't happened before this point.
No.
So we don't really know why he might be thirsty for blood. But that was the thing that kind of triggered in my mind. I'm like, okay, so maybe he was absorbed in his Will obsession, where he's surrounded by all of Will's things, he's inside of Will's home, and maybe it just triggered that animal instinct of wanting to have...
But going with your comment, though, thirsty for blood and about how weak it is and unnecessary it is because Hannibal is not thirsty for blood in the same way that I am not thirsty for cow's blood. I'll eat the hell out of some meat from that cow, and I will love every moment of it. And I will enjoy the amazing,
the rare steak.
But the amazing delight.
Always my favorite.
But you're not sitting there being like, man, I'd like, if there was a cow next to me, I would poke it and just lick some of the blood up, because that's not what it's about. So that takes the.
I have definitely said that I would pass a cow while driving and say I would love to just grab a chunk of that cow. I wouldn't lick it.
But
blood.
you would.
Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying.
There's a difference between a chunk of it and the blood.
Hannibal could look at people and see an excellent rump roast.
Yes.
But he is unlikely to lick them because it's not the same.
Well, see, the thing to me that destroys and brings it down is that Hannibal, in my mind, is a very controlled and possible more sadist than anything, on the scale of masochist to sadist. Definitely not masochistic, but would definitely, as we obviously know about what Hannibal does or convinces other people to do in the future Hannibal in the books, future Hannibal in the series, is much more of a control, and here you hurt yourself, not ever being the kind of person who would administer pain intentionally.
It seemed
on
out
himself.
of character.
Yes,
it
very
definitely
out of character.
did. And it seemed like it was a device, not even to get us anywhere, but it was almost like a. We need something creepy to happen here. Yeah, almost like
just throw this in there.
They showed this episode to the Suits, and someone said, "This isn't weird."
You know what'd be funny is if Hannibal,
like someone who totally doesn't get the development, but just thought it'd be cool to just put something in there that might make people go. Oh,
it didn't sit right, but I still tried to explain it because I like the show so much. I'm like, I gotta make a
You'd like to think that it had purpose.
I think you're right the first time. It was just a lousy bit of shorthand that ultimately did not serve the purpose it was intended to, and just gave that perverse little, oh, he's like a vampire.
Right.
And obviously it took me a long time to explain what I was saying or what I was possibly thinking to explain it in my mind. So
I don't.
It's a stretch.
I don't feel that it has the value they wanted it to, or the value something like that would deserve from the show.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Let's just talk. We're not going to go scene by scene for the episode. But
the only thing I realized that I didn't say when we were talking about family and the way the families were seemingly perfect. Nuclear kind of. Price called them Norman Rockwell with a bullet.
Oh yes, I've got that. I've got that written right down.
That brings me to, let's talk about the lab geeks. Because we spend a lot of time with them.
We do,
and we get such wonderful lines where the lab's talking about their family, and Price says, "My parents gave me a gift, a twin. Who wouldn't want two of me?" We find out Beverly Katz is the oldest.
Which thoroughly makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Zeller is the middle child. Also makes sense. He's he's very utilitarian. He does his work. He does it well. He's not flashy.
He's always trying to find his place, which makes sense why he's done things that are not, that are questionable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But he, wait, we're talking about Zeller here? Zeller's the one that had the fling with
Freddie.
Little Miss Freddie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that middle child? He's trying to find himself. He has no...
Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't have
So he could be cool by telling Freddie the things she wanted to know.
Okay.
He would be lured. Price, Freddie wouldn't go after Price, but Price would just be like, well, okay, so it doesn't make sense that a girl like you would be interested in me, so you're clearly trying to manipulate me. Zeller's got that good all-American look to him, and so he would go with it.
Right. And would want to go for that because the middle child is usually looking for value
to fit.
And to fit somewhere, At their what did they say?
Oh, they specifically Price dug at him.
Oh, and I've got it.
Well, wasn't there a thing about they make they
make really good. That's what Will says.
Politicians are really bad ones.
Or really bad ones. Yeah, I was just like.
I thought that was really good politicians are really bad ones.
But essentially, you're the type that's going to go into politics, whether or not you're a good or a bad one. You're a politician.
But they assign their places in family, and they assign the value to their places in family, who you are in the birth hierarchy, because it totally makes me laugh about, the youngest sister got away with murder. My older brothers and sisters have said that for years. I didn't think I got away with anything. Mm-hmm. But in their eyes, I got away with murder.
So are you the youngest?
I'm the youngest.
I'm the oldest.
I'm the oldest.
Yeah, so we got two oldest.
I'm the oldest with 13-year difference, so it's almost like I didn't have siblings. I had a surrogate son thing.
Yeah, there's 12 years between me and my sister. So the three of them are like within 5 years of each other, and then I came much later.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sister practically raised me. Yeah, because my mom was done by that point. but I can see, it was so interesting to see all that and that whole thing of
talking about
where you are, because we are talking about where Abigail is and where Hannibal is and where Will is and even where Jack is when it comes to family.
Yes, at the end of
because
the
we even do that.
Yeah.
So having them not only talk about who they are in their families, but what that means. With their personalities and what it might lead you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we bring this family theme into almost every scene in the episode. Yes. We're going back to Abigail in the world's most beautiful and ornate and exciting and vintage asylum.
Yeah.
It could be in a Hammer film.
Alana. Toronto's beautiful.
Yes. I have been saying this, the locations they're choosing, even Will's house looks like art.
Absolutely. So Alana and Abigail go for a walk.
Yes.
And I thought it was, you had a moment of Abigail examining her scar before putting on her scarf to go out for a walk with Alana.
Alana also wearing a scarf to meet Abigail.
With her signature print. Mm-hmm. She has this scalloped or hashed...
I'm noticing it now. I didn't notice it initially, but now that you've started mentioning it,
she not only has a color palette, but she has a pattern palette, and it's either like the dress she's wearing, like a wrap dress later on. Mm-hmm. It has that scallop, sort of paint, like ink, pen and ink style thing, and it's on her scarf. Mm-hmm. You see it reoccurring, even though everything else she's wearing is plain. She still has the scarf with that signature print of hers on, and they sort of take this on for every episode for her.
There are two things in this scene that really stood out, and it's to the point of everybody is speaking in metaphors at this point.
Yeah.
Abigail says, "I can hide what happened to me. All I need is a scarf to pass." And a lot of this series is about appearing normal but being anything but. Hannibal is like that. Will can appear normal to his class because he's not speaking to anyone, he's just speaking.
Exactly.
But once you get into an interaction, his passing starts to fall apart. Hannibal manages to keep his mask up the entire time. Later in the series, they call it an immaculate person suit.
Wow.
Which is
what an amazing
most wonderful way to describe Hannibal. Yeah. So that really stood out to me. And then Abigail talking about how she's sick of interacting with people. And Alana says, isolation can suck just as much. You have to find someone to relate to in this experience, which again brings up Hannibal is this isolated man. Will is this isolated man. As we see at the end of the episode, Jack Crawford is fairly isolated even from his wife. Alana, we don't know what her life is like.
No, we don't see any of her life outside
her only
of her
interaction really is what comes up in this next scene, because after we have to find someone to relate to, we cut immediately to Hannibal opening the door on Alana.
Yes.
And he asks, do you have an appointment? And she says, do you have a beer?
Yeah.
Which is really cool because in very, very quick order, with very little dialogue reinforce it. We understand that Alana has a different relationship with Hannibal than anyone else on this show.
Yes.
Alana has a history with Hannibal. They are colleagues. And we remember then in the first episode, Alana recommends Hannibal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they have had experience.
a
They work
professional
together.
relationship.
They have a professional relationship, and this beer scene, clearly they're friends.
Oh, and everything about it is about the comfort that they have in being in each other's presence, and you don't always see that in the other scenes with other characters. The way that whole thing of the glibness of do you have a beer, and how he comes in, he has wine and she has beer, and he sits right up next to her. There is no patient doctor. We're going to sit across
especially
from
with
each
as
other.
far as Hannibal sits from people who are not his equals.
Yes. He rarely, the only
Still
person
sits
he's
pretty
ever
far
asked
from
to
Will.
sit next to him
Well,
is
because
Freddy.
he's still not sure about.
He's still analyzing.
Yeah, he's still looking at Will from afar.
Well, and with Freddy, it's
but
an
that was
act
to be,
of
but that was to be
aggression.
Oh,
creepy.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was
with
a power
Alana, it's
play.
an act of
familiarity.
familiarity, but
Right.
it's also an act. He is hiding, and it's an act of, hey, we're buddies, just like people
Right.
do.
Well, he also has to keep that going to protect himself.
Yeah.
Especially because she's
just
close
like
to,
people do.
well, just like people do. But the way they sit and they talk.
I'm not a serial killer.
right, exactly.
Don't pay any attention to the man behind the man. Oh dear.
But what I loved about it, it was flirty.
Yes, it was.
And it was so interesting because we don't really, again, we haven't really seen this.
He's
Okay.
a force of nature.
Yeah.
He's not a person.
His
And what's
passion is
interesting
for
is
the cooking and the people. He doesn't really express any passion for people in that, other than
like a
and so it's
romantic,
interesting to
sexual
see
love.
this.
exactly. And that's why it was so interesting to have them have that little moment where he is a little flirty with her. And she it's very subtle. It's very quick. It's right at the end of their scene. They have like a very quick moment. And I know I'm sitting there going, well, this is how he learns how to manipulate her. Yeah. Although we know very little about Alana, we never see a partner.
Yeah.
We never see a family.
She has nothing.
We never
she
see
has nothing surrounding her.
Exactly.
At all.
She is always alone. So for all we know, Hannibal.
And she
the way
won't
his
even
mind-
hang out with Will.
I know
by herself.
exactly. Be by herself. Yeah. So it sort of, for me in that moment, it was more of a devious. Like, I know what's going to keep power with this woman and keep control of her.
So you don't think he actually has attraction?
He might.
I mean, that's the big question with Hannibal, isn't it? Is how much of what he's presenting is actually legitimate, and how much is a calculated scarf that he's wearing to
pass.
hide what he is.
At this stage, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
You know, like I didn't know if we were hinting at something later on. I also didn't know, again, if it was if this was a studio notes thing.
Hey, you got to get a love interest.
You got to
in
get a
there.
love interest.
It's like, well, Will can't have a love interest. Okay, give her to Hannibal.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is I've seen this happen before. Perfectly good TV series ruined because we have to have a manufactured love
I'm reasonably
interest.
certain that Hannibal having lovey interactions is 100% Brian Fuller and his weird perverse fascinations. And not NBC being like, hey, could the monster have a love interest? Because he's a monster, right?
Right. We got to soften this a little bit.
Could we see him suck blood? I mean,
yeah.
he's basically a vampire, right? Could he prick his finger and suck on it? Because that's exciting. And NBC would be the opposite. They'd be like, we're not sure that your female lead should have a relationship with the monster.
I know, sometimes they do weird stuff like that. When they get freaked out with how, I don't know, this Hannibal character is, there's nothing to, nice about him. He's the monster. Well, weird shit has happened like this.
From what I've heard
on shows,
Hannibal actually has very little network interaction beyond
that's
Brian
wonderful.
Fuller saying, this is what I want to do. and the network liaison saying, okay, well, here's what you need to do in order to achieve this on network TV.
That's good.
Because of the weird dynamic of it, Hannibal is actually a show that's produced like 50 to 70% by an overseas corporation. NBC's picking up the remainder, which is why it's been able to survive, because it's essentially a beautiful show that's very critically acclaimed for very little money.
Yes.
You know, they're getting it for less than a sitcom price.
Wow.
And they're getting this gorgeous television series because it's being produced and it's being funded by all these overseas deals. And I think that's got a lot to do with De Laurentiis, which is an international company, and De Laurentiis has always been able to wring that money out of,
most definitely. I guess it's just sort of my knee-jerk reaction when I see something that sort of seems out of character.
It's to blame the network?
It's to blame the network.
Oh, I understand it.
Yeah, so, because at times, like the pricking of the finger and this, and I had the two thoughts simultaneously. We're either leading us down a road. This is a hint of something else that's going to be even weirder and creepier down the road with the two of them. Even if it was a romantic interest, that is creepy, or it's somebody who wanted to add something in a way to soften something that could make people uncomfortable. Because sometimes television wants to do that. I'm happy that this show is not doing that. But I think it's my initial knee-jerk reaction when I see something like that seems oddly out of character at the time, to want to say that is outside influence, or it's an odd choice at an odd time. Because it did seem so interesting in that time for them, because they've had a lot of very friendly interaction. They have had let's agree to disagree, batting back and forth.
And disagreeing grumpily with their arms folded in front of Principal Jack Crawford.
Exactly. Throwing each other under the bus.
No, I don't like it.
They have a very full relationship, but this is the first time I've ever seen anything where there's like an exchange of looks. Yeah. And kind of, we're a lot of sort of like, it took what he said, not in a friendly, professional way, but we crossed a little line into something a little bit more flirtatious. So I'm interested to see if that goes anywhere.
Well, let's follow this to another scene. We have a number of psychiatry scenes between Hannibal and Will here. There's a lot. And we have my favorite moment where Hannibal says, "Tell me about your mother." And Will says, "Some lazy psychiatry, Dr. Lecter, low-hanging fruit." But then...
Oh, no, he says I believe this is very high on the tree.
He says, "I suspect the food is on a high branch." It's like, wow, just popping with, you've got nothing that's extraneous.
They seamlessly run with that metaphor in a very natural way. And their banter back and forth is about this whole thing of, and then it's a food metaphor.
Oh, yeah.
Too, which is so interesting, and what I found interesting about this whole interaction, I believe this is where we hop back and forth. We not only talk about Will's family experience, we talk about Hannibal's family experience, we talk about the recently murdered family,
that Abigail and Hannibal are both orphans. Now, Abigail is an orphan now, and Hannibal was orphaned, which shows that Will has knowledge of Hannibal's history, which is interesting. I don't know that we've seen that. I may be wrong.
No. I can't point to a place where we discussed or were told that Will
I can't either.
I can't remember.
And so they go with that, with Will's past, and with the Turner family, which was the family we saw earlier. And we're seeing there's all this swirling together. And Will is working through his theories about the case.
Yes.
Hannibal is trying to get Will to understand his relationship with his family, and I think trying to propose this new family, this My Two Dads Paul Reiser thing going on.
Exactly.
Where Hannibal and Will are sharing custody of Abigail Hobbs.
Yeah, that Alana thinks is the worst idea ever.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it didn't go very well on the show either, so...
Well, yeah. I mean, it was crazy when Paul Reiser ate the girl.
The next line that really stuck out to me was where Will says that there's nothing, or there's something so foreign about family, like an ill-fitting suit. he says that he never connected to the concept. And I thought that was interesting, that even with this development of a possible paternal figure to Abigail, he's still unsure of it. And it's like, I don't know where the lines are, and I'm just going to try not to cross them, even though his actions have obviously shown.
Well, he also mentioned, Hannibal mentions that he created the family, obviously referring to Will's dogs. Will says, I created a family of strays, and Abigail is a stray at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hannibal is a stray. Will is a stray. Whoever miscellaneous cipher Alana, which may not have we have no idea.
We don't know what her family is.
So the only people who seem to have reasonable family relationships are our lab geeks.
They are
right
because they understand where they are in the hierarchy of family.
That's true.
And Will does not. Hannibal does not. Abigail does not, because of all these things.
And then this also connects, like I said, so very closely with the choices that are made by the killer. Because there's just that whole long thing about how, the family, you didn't choose the family you were born with.
Oh,
and that they're a bridge.
You make your family.
And you make your family.
Yeah.
Which in a sense, a lot of people have experienced. In different ways in their lives, where they've lost their family and they found new ones through friends, or they didn't get along with their family. It's like an argument I've always had with my mother, who has this sort of thing that family means more than anything and friends mean nothing. And my whole argument is I love my friends so much because they actually give me more of what I need than any of you do. Because in family, sometimes you have a tendency to disrespect your other family members because they're family. And it becomes about...
Because they have to love you.
They have to love you. Exactly.
You don't need to be nice to them because they have to love you.
And you don't have to also all get along because you're individuals that were just put in this situation.
Right.
And you're all different. Your friends are friends because they're like you. Or
they
enough
seek you
like
out,
you.
Or you seek
Which
them
is
out.
interesting when Molly Shannon later says you have to make family. You can only have one family, and it's the family you choose.
Yes.
So Will is choosing his family. Hannibal, we see, desperately trying to assemble a family. And, knowing some of his backstory from the book Hannibal and from Hannibal Rising, you see how he lost his family, and now he's trying to put together a new one. And I think for someone as intelligent as Hannibal Lecter, and someone as particular and extreme and different as Hannibal Lecter, someone who can connect it all is extremely rare. And that's why he focuses on, Abigail is sort of a blank slate, but clearly has capacity to love someone like Hannibal.
Yes, because
Will
of that connection.
Is completely, the empathy disorder, Hannibal can manipulate that to his advantage.
Yes.
So it's really fascinating how Hannibal tries to create family. And I love Hannibal's little dinners with Jack Crawford.
This one in particular. Again, another one that it makes it sad that it wasn't aired.
Yeah.
Because this is the first time granted, maybe it's kind of a good thing that we save it for later. But
the first moment we see that Hannibal likely killed a person and delivered him. Hannibal first mentions that you promised to deliver your wife to my dinner table, which again is
wonderful.
I'm not. It may as well. Hi, I'm a cannibal. Ask me about my dinners.
Yes.
But
how to serve man.
The lovely "What am I putting in my mouth?"
Yes.
From Jack Rabbit. He should have hopped faster.
He should have hopped
both
faster.
have a good laugh at the poor boy who got brutally murdered for the dinner.
Jack is imagining, a rabbit not hopping fast enough,
Which is still
but
like
Hannibal
a wolf.
is imagining a human being not running, and you have a 10-second glimpse.
It's predatory.
Of someone running.
Yeah,
it's an interesting predatory link. So we know that Jack Crawford is not thinking about humans being served on the plate. But we know that Hannibal is.
Because why would he?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But it's wonderful to have that.
that.
They're thinking of two different things.
Yeah.
that are mirrored.
Well, and it's giving us
other.
that question: is why is one acceptable and the other isn't? I mean, we all know why, but it still makes us ask that question. And if the show can make us ask that question, then it is succeeding.
Exactly. Then when they start to realize that there's a runaway,
the lab geeks are starting to realize that
all
the killers are either kids or a person collecting kids, and they're calling them the Lost Boys.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's all we get from the scene.
Right. So that leads them to sort of believe that maybe there is a childlike adult or another child that's doing it, but it's Will who
like
makes
a Peter Pan.
Yeah,
Peter Pan,
exactly.
right.
They talk about
But we get back to class.
Yeah, and Jack
And Will is again talking about bite marks and the suction bruise, which is right out of Red Dragon. And I think he's still talking about Francis Dollaride. So throughout this season, we're going to see little glimpses that Francis Dollaride is on the loose, is killing people, and maybe has not yet discovered what makes him unique and interesting.
Right.
You know, I don't, obviously we can't go too deep into it, but the two families that are killed in Red Dragon are very distinct and unique. Yep. And very similar. So I think what's interesting is if this really is what we're seeing, Francis Dollaride honing his craft and growing as a killer throughout this season and next season, what a fascinating way to introduce a big bad for the future.
Yes.
You know, this is a long game we're playing.
Yeah, so once we get to this boss, we're going to be kind of blown over.
And we have Angry Jack again, who in the first episode says, use the ladies' room.
Yes.
And in this episode, he says, class dismissed.
Yes.
What did I just say?
All these people.
It's like Jack Crawford would be the most difficult man to work for ever.
Oh, that's the whole idea.
And you know, there are kids in that class who are just like, fuck, we have a final next week, and I don't know what's going to be on it.
Even Will is like, how do you expect me to educate these people?
Yeah.
How do you expect me to teach? Because he does. He keeps coming in the middle. You have to come in and disrupt these kids still, you know.
Could you not have waited till the end of the class? How long could my class possibly be?
Exactly.
Seriously.
And we go into class because there's a new tableau.
Yes.
We're at Christmas, and this is a beautiful entryway.
It is beautifully
where we
shot.
enter into this McMansion.
Yes.
We hear the music, the Christmas. It's No Place Like Home for the holidays. We're going in over a balcony into a great room.
It's overly done for Christmas.
And it's clearly Christmas morning because there are people in their pajamas with presents open. And dead. And what really stood out to me was the child in the fireplace.
Yes.
Because that was a shocking little moment. And it was just this really quick thing before we cut to Molly Shannon. I mean, really, we don't even get to sit with it because the FBI's not there yet.
No. Because they just come in and they set the scene. But when we came in, because we're up on a balcony. Yeah. When you come in, you can see all the Christmas decorations and you hear the music. And the minute I realized that this house was decorated for Christmas and there was Christmas music, and we've been looking at golden fall leaves just turning, we know winter has not yet come. Oh my, I was afraid of them going over that balcony edge because I knew they were dead. I knew they had to be. And I knew they had to be for like 8 months or possibly even 10 months. So they looked actually pretty fresh for what should have been. I'm assuming it's probably around September in that time of year.
I think we're later. No, I think we're
later because everything is gold.
Right
yeah, everything is so
September
gold.
Just doesn't deliver that. We've still got green leaves at that point.
They looked remarkably fresh.
So we jump forward maybe a month between these kills. The timing in this series is always very hazy, and I think that's part of the dreamlike quality. They want to keep us unsettled. They don't want us to be 100% confident, except for in this one, we are 100% confident of what day it is and where we are
and when it happened. Yeah, but it was a scary moment because I was like, oh God, since Christmas. Oh, it was kind of, it made it more horrifying. You know, and to think that they hadn't been discovered since then, and what that was going, and you do get an indication when they do finally come in.
Yeah,
because people are gagging, and it's pretty horrific.
Before that,
and then there's the burnt body in the fireplace,
which is one of the worst smells. We get to hang out
with Will and Beverly, who's flirting with Will like crazy. Mm-hmm. Beverly is trying to impress him by talking about this artist, Willard Wiggin, who does micro sculptures. And I immediately connected that with the fly fishing, the magnifying glass. And Will is just not paying attention at all.
Yeah.
And Beverly is just throwing these things. You know, he had a lonely childhood. And then we're back into the kids. And really, again, I think you're right. It's just that it's so uninteresting compared with everything else. Because we've seen shows where a person is taking impressionable kids under her. We've seen that.
Yeah.
We haven't seen some of these horrendous things that are happening with our main characters.
Yeah. And like all of this is rather unnecessary, as wonderful as Molly Shannon is as this,
and she is very good and unexpected. So like when you see Molly Shannon for the first time, you're like, oh, it's superstar, excellent. And then
she starts talking, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I don't.
She's a monster,
and it is. And the kids who are like the poor Connor, who is is deer in the headlights, and terrified, and the CJ is creepy as all
which brings us to that sequence at the gas station, which, again, it's sort of uncertain what it wants to be. It puts CJ Lincoln, who they've figured out is like, they think he's Peter Pan.
He's the ringleader.
And he's got this intensity and this creepiness, so it's like he was the first of the kidnapped kids or something like that.
Which would make sense because he is older.
He is the oldest.
And he's the lure, maybe he helps bring kids in.
And what's also interesting to make a Peter Pan reference is that you have to remain young to remain one of the Lost Boys. And he's growing up. So he is on the cusp of not being part of that family anymore. Mm. So that might have been something that they were, like a subtext of why he was so scary and why he was manipulating these other boys. He has a position of power right now.
Well, he's becoming a real monster. Mm-hmm. The boys are wind-up monsters.
Yeah.
They wind them up, point them at their families, give them a gun, and say, kill them all.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she's telling them.
CJ is a real monster,
yeah.
But it
was unnecessary.
It's there, but it's not interesting.
We could have still had a brilliant episode if we only ever talked about these people without seeing them.
Yeah.
And it could have been. Yeah. It could have been fine.
And it would have been bold.
Yes, and
to have a procedural where we only see
and use our imaginations of who these people are, how and then get this when we find out maybe at the end when they finally figure it out. And they get the kids. He has the whole conversation with the kid in the car. Well, she said that they weren't really my family, and that you had to make. That was all we needed to see.
Yeah,
that would have made that conversation extra important and striking. If we hadn't seen any of the other stuff.
I agree.
We could have done it all in that car.
But then they wouldn't have been able to have a special guest star, Molly
Shannon.
That's
true. That's what I said.
Well, they still could have had
as much as I want to say it was unnecessary, it's hard to say that because I did love her as this character. In the whole thing of, like, she's trying to be nurturing and taking care of the boys like they were, but then the way she would talk about the family thing, it was a subtle level of, like, you fingers on your spine.
Skin crawling.
Yeah,
definitely skin crawling moments.
So what really stood out to me at this point in the episode is Will is feeling very much like a betrayal by the boys. The boys gave away their families, and he never had the opportunity. So that's what we were talking about earlier. But then it really reinforced how odd it is that Will feels most comfortable and most safe outside his home rather than in it. It really emphasizes the schism in this character. Is he wants so much to be a normal person, he wants so much to have relationships and families. He clearly is vaguely attracted to Alana, whether he knows what to do with it or not, but he also knows that he ultimately can't. He's sort of like the Phantom.
Right.
He knows he can't engage in real society, so that leads him to have to maintain these certain ways of interacting.
And in one of their earlier discussions about family, Hannibal actually says to him, because he said he moved so often, he was like, oh, so you were always the new kid at school, always the stranger.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot
always
of people, sometimes that helps with people, because then they learn how to adapt quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my husband's like that. He moves so often. He comes into a room. He's friends with everybody. He remembers all the details. And he said not because he's naturally like that, because he's introverted. It was a survival mechanism.
Same here.
And that has continued into adulthood and makes him good as a manager and makes him, and all that stuff. But some people never fall into that. The kids that move around a whole lot are either become the mayor and shake everybody's hand and become social, or they're the loner that nobody ever talks to because they don't know how to break that barrier. And I think that's what he was trying to point out to Will. Always the stranger. Mm-hmm. If you're always the stranger, do you even feel welcome in your own house?
Let's talk about the meat of the episode, which is Hannibal inviting Abigail home for dinner. He goes and picks her up from the hospital. She wonders if he's even allowed to, and he doesn't really care.
Right.
He takes her home. What struck me immediately is that Abigail has been having dreams about getting text photos from Marissa, her friend killed by, she thinks, Nicholas Boyle.
Yes. But we know.
Nicholas Boyle, the pictures are of Nicholas Boyle gutted, and Hannibal immediately twists the knife with the way you left him.
Yes.
So
because
he doesn't give it a moment. It's like, yeah, we're all keeping this secret, Abigail.
Yes.
We're all just trying to protect you. So maybe you should just keep your fucking mouth shut.
Well, she actually says that, the reason why I'm saying these things to you is because I can't say them to anybody else, not even here.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's been keeping this stuff quiet from, the therapists and the nurses that are working there, but she feels comfortable.
When she asks if this stuff makes her a sociopath, which again reinforces, does that make me, am I sick?
Yeah.
And then Hannibal says that makes you a survivor, which indicates what he feels about having survived the situation in Lithuania with his sister Misha, which is, I
think would be
Misha. I
Misha.
assume they're going... Misha? I assume they're going to delve into this more, but this is part of the plot of Hannibal, where I feel, go way too much into the past of Hannibal, because I really don't want to know that much about Hannibal's past.
You kind of
but it's Hannibal justifying that he took what was given to him and turned it into survival techniques. Mm-hmm. Abigail is doing the same. She's taking what was given to her, a father who's insane, who's a serial killer, who's killing girls that look like her.
Yes.
And is turning it into a survival instinct. So that's why Hannibal right there sees, okay, I can bond with this girl.
Mm-hmm. There's a great color change in Hannibal, too.
Really?
He does a color change here. Just similarly to the way he changes only when he goes to Will's house. For the rest of the episode, he's in his signature blues. He suits sort of that sapphire blue that is all over the show.
Sometimes with the red line.
With the red, yeah. You have like a red, in his beautiful tie.
I want that suit.
And I want
to learn how to do the whatever triple Windsor he's got going.
I know,
he's got
it's the biggest Windsor knot I've ever seen. I really want to know where they get those ties, because they're beautiful, just beautiful. And then the pocket square, and then his suits are those plaids.
Yeah.
Which where do you find that? Who wears that?
Well, what's lovely is seeing Brian Fuller in interviews.
Yes. Oh, does he look like that?
Like Hannibal.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we're going to meet Frederick Chilton soon. Chilton is the head of the asylum that Hannibal winds up in. And Chilton dresses similar to Hannibal. And so what's really lovely is seeing Brian Fuller in interviews dressed like both Chilton and Hannibal. And it's just like, okay, I see what you
see where, okay.
It's like, okay, you were like, could we do this? I've been dreaming of this thing.
Yeah.
And I bet he's got his costume designers just make me an extra one.
Oh, there you go.
Just
yeah.
whip
They're
up
exquisite.
two and throw one my direction. He showed up at Comic-Con in a completely blood red suit.
Wow.
Yes.
3-piece suit, blood red.
Yeah.
So it's these stylistic choices are quirky
Yes.
and weird, and at the same time, you know, if you had told me that, and if I had told you, Nico, that they are going to put Hannibal in blue and red checked suits,
Yes.
if they're going to go with plaids for Hannibal,
Yes.
would you have thought, well, that sounds stupid?
It would, hearing that, I would be like, well, because my first thought would be something more like Leisure Suit Larry kind of,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, plaids.
Well,
like,
he's
you know, he's going to be
wearing
Mr. Roper.
70s plaid,
But
though.
he is, but they're
Tailored
beautiful.
perfectly.
Well,
They're
and
subtle.
I think what it is all of our encounter with Hannibal, pre-Italy Hannibal, is he's wearing blue,
Yes.
he's wearing white, you know, in Red Dragon, Red Dragon and Manhunter, Hannibal is 100% in white.
In white.
In Baltimore, in Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal is in white, a t-shirt and white pants. He wears his blue coveralls in the asylum in Silence. And so we've seen him in we've seen him in things that Hannibal Lecter would not wear.
No.
Right.
We've never seen
This
Hannibal's
is so
style.
it's very individual. It shows that he's dressing in a way that expresses himself.
Yeah.
He's spending a lot of money on it because the cut of everything is amazing.
Finer things in
and
life.
You can tell everything is. So then he goes from these richly textured and patterned and that sapphire blue, which is the signature of this. They even somehow managed to filter that onto the girl's hair in a previous scene,
Yeah, I
where they
noticed
both
that
had like
too.
a brown and black hair, and as they did each reverse, each girl's hair
They've got blue
had
highlights.
blue highlights. I'm like, how did they do that? And then all of a sudden he shows up to release Abigail, and he's wearing a black suit with red.
Yeah. Which is so out of character.
Which is so out of character. It's very simple. Although his red shirt later on, when you see him because he's always wearing the 3-piece suit.
He's got the vest while he's
Yeah.
cooking. I love
Yeah.
Hannibal cooking
Yes.
because he is so well dressed. And
Yes.
he's got the simple white apron around his waist.
Yeah, wrapped
It's-
around.
It's
and,
just, it's
Yes. So when he
gorgeous.
has it, the black vest, and he's got the apron, and then whenever you see him talking, the texture of that red shirt is interesting. I mean, it is. It's like a hound.
He doesn't wear any smooth texture.
No,
shirts.
no.
They're
Never
always-
smooth checker.
They've got scallops or they've got little grid patterns. They've got something.
But it's like what an interesting choice.
It just
for
makes
him
me
to
feel
be-
like I could live in comfort like that if I would spend $200 on a shirt.
Yes, that's pretty much it. But
But I can't.
oh, I don't know. Maybe at the outlet mall.
So Abigail wants to go work for the FBI
Yes,
because she sees Will.
And she
I
thinks she
think.
could be like
She
that.
And
thinks
she thinks she can be like that. And I love that Hannibal would feel safer if she was working for the FBI, protecting his interests.
yes. He
Not
does both Will
protecting the United
and
States,
Abigail.
but protecting his interests.
Keep close to me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'll be
And then
down
we
too.
get to the lovely thing of Hannibal dosing
Yes,
Abigail with
Psilocybin
mushrooms.
And she says, "You want me to do drugs? I want you to do this drug.
This drug.
With my supervision."
It's supposed to help with the nightmares.
So let's,
Well.
I can't go into this. I can't. But I want to put a placeholder on Abigail dropping the teacup.
Yes.
Okay. Episode 1, the first family killed, their password is teacup. Okay?
Oh my god! I didn't
Also
even
in
realize
episode
that.
1, Hannibal talks about teacups. Will talks about teacups. I can only point this out because it is essential for later in the series, and it's amazing how often they're referencing teacups. And broken teacups.
For me, the best part of that whole scene is when he says, "Do you trust me?" And he hands her the teacup.
Yeah, more secrets for us.
Right.
You and I will have many secrets.
But in that moment, "Do you trust me?" And he hands out the teacup, and her acceptance of that trust is her taking the teacup.
It's to the biblical Eden. It's the handing of, here, try this apple. It's and it's this wonderful version of that, because Hannibal is representing. Brian Fuller has said unequivocally, Hannibal Lecter is the devil. The creator of the show has said it. Thomas Harris said he realized after writing Silence of the Lambs that Hannibal Lecter is the devil. And in the book Hannibal, animals are scared of him. He can do what he wants. I don't know that I like that we've elevated him to this, but it makes so much. If we want to look at it completely from a literature standpoint, it makes so much sense. We're looking at Dante, we're looking at Milton here now, and we're seeing a villain that has the charm and the beauty of the villains from Paradise Lost, and we're seeing what Mephistopheles looks like given human form in this black and red suit.
And it is. It's
and I can't be more excited about it.
There is a lot going on. Abigail hallucinates. He's making breakfast for dinner.
Breakfast for dinner. Time. Yeah, which is great, because it leads right from a discussion of the lab geeks, where first of all we go very much into cliche territory, where the FBI has their map with yarn and push pins, trying to find the pattern. But then we get this line: bond with your captors, you survive. If you don't, you're breakfast. And we cut to breakfast for dinner being made by Hannibal. I mean, it's a threat for the character without being a threat for the show in any way.
Yeah. We get to see that again. And that was how they were considering how taste is not only biochemical, it's also psychological.
Psychological.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then that's when Abigail mentions that sausage and eggs were the last meal that she had with her parents.
Yeah, and that's a really incredibly manipulative move on Hannibal's part.
Yeah, he describes it as high life eggs. A chef in Spain called Muro claimed he invented it in the 19th century.
Now I'm going to have to learn how to make high life eggs.
It looks like your
delicious.
Eggs in the basket.
I really wanted to eat
eggs
it.
In a basket. Yeah. So I will
I think it was the choice of the bread.
Yeah, the last meal that she's having with her parents and the first meal she's having with Hannibal. Because Hannibal says he wants to give her power back. That's his the reason for all of this is he's trying to. I mean, I think if we look at Hannibal as being very curious as what will happen, it's Hannibal wanting to see what she actually is. He thinks he knows what she is. He thinks he knows how involved she was with the murders, but he's not certain. He knows she slid up Nicholas Boyle.
Yes.
Really graphically. Yeah. He knows that she has that in her.
She does a flashback to that too, because when he asks her to talk about it, she sees herself slitting the deer.
The deer, yes.
And then also
she hallucinates the deer, and then to his face,
and then So we do get to see that the correlation between the two.
Yeah, she relives
from the deer
that
to Nicholas.
Jack has a wonderful line that really reinforces what we're seeing here, is that family can have a contagious effect on some people, influences them to adopt similar behaviors and attitudes, which is so much what Hannibal is trying to do.
Yes.
And we get to... So finally we get to the climax of the episode, which is little Chris O'Halloran, the little boy who peed in the gas station, the little boy who seemed uncertain about all this, returning home, his family being all surprised, and we get the SWAT team arriving, just like they arrived in the grocery store.
Yes, exactly.
And what I love is Jack really likes to run shotgun point. the SWAT team's got laser-guided automatic weapons, and Jack is there with the double hand, just both hands on the shotgun, just like, okay, I got this if you guys don't.
Right,
don't worry.
Right. I'm here.
I got this.
I got you back.
But ultimately, the shit goes down so quickly in this episode.
It does.
And it's almost secondary. Mm-hmm. Like they get there and there's a standoff, and then the kid runs, and CJ, the crazy Peter Pan guy, falls onto the grill and gets shot. But ultimately, the speed at which they go through this means that the creators didn't want to spend more time on it.
Right.
Yeah.
You barely see it.
It's
you barely
almost
see it all
obligatory.
happen.
And the only thing I think that's of value is the kid turns and points his gun at Will, and Will immediately points his gun at the kid and then overthinks it and puts his gun down.
Yeah.
And then Molly Shannon comes out of, I don't know, the boathouse or whatever.
Or a garage.
What's going on there? Because she was just waiting in the court.
Pool house.
I don't know.
The pool house. Well, she's the architect of all this.
Right. She wants to see if the boy will actually do it of his own volition.
And
exactly.
she's taken down pretty quickly by FBI. So again, it's inconsequential.
It's our eldest child.
So one of my favorite lines here is coming up in this next scene where Alana comes to where are they?
At Hannibal's house.
They are at Hannibal's house. Okay, so
Hannibal,
comes to Hannibal's house.
Hannibal has taken Abigail out of the asylum, and Alana went, presumably, drove all the way out there to see her, and found, oh no, your buddy Hannibal Lecter took her. And she's just like,
and she is pissed.
She is so mad at him. Mm-hmm. And this line is delivered beautifully. Alana looks at Hannibal and says, "That is rude, Hannibal. Shockingly rude."
Yeah.
And from what we know about Hannibal and our previous experiences with either the movies or the books, we know that is his key. Yeah. And it's even been mentioned earlier.
With Freddie Lounge.
With Freddie Lounge.
You've been frightfully rude in this lounge.
Yes.
What are we going to do about that?
It's a thing. Hannibal has a problem with rudeness. And Hannibal was definitely rude and overstepped his bounds here.
Mm-hmm. It was great to have her point that out.
Oh, it was beautiful.
And she was so angry when she said it, too.
It was almost like maybe did that where it wasn't obviously the whole origin of his dislike of rudeness, but it was like, okay, maybe that's where he really connects with Alana, is that they have some of the very same tics.
Yeah.
Where not liking people's rude behavior is one of the things that they maybe have discussed previously. And other, familial or familiar conversations that they may have had in the past, either professionally or friendship, that we kind of sort of saw with that beer, wine, and let's have a drink moment.
Yeah.
That maybe they've actually brought this up. And for her to kind of point it out, you could almost see he didn't really cower, but it was like this admission of, yes, what I did was wrong, slap me on the wrist, yes, we know I wasn't supposed to be doing this. Right. And it looked a little bit like that being chastised.
But I love the fact that Hannibal had set the table for 3.
That was...
Alana has a spot at the table. Mm-hmm. And Hannibal's table is beautiful.
Yeah.
For dinner. I mean, did you see that? I think it was a mango that he had carved, so it kind of looked like a banana where the outside was around and
everything on that table is always exquisite. Like when he has Jack over, it's beautiful.
Where does he have the time?
He's a loner. He has got a lot of money.
It was pointed out that he is a single man living in a gigantic house.
Yeah.
How much could he possibly have to clean on a regular basis? And how much, I imagine that Hannibal is the kind of guy who puts things away when he is done with them.
Yes.
Everything has its place.
Sure.
Like his pencils on his desk when he's sharpening it and he shows Jack and he just adjusts it.
They have a specific place to be.
Yeah.
And a way. He has a way.
Exactly. So the big
Well, he covers over that it's mushrooms. It just says he gave her.
He gave her Valium.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
so there's that. That also the next thing is just so you know she might be a little bit despondent.
She's not on drugs or anything.
I gave her some Valium. Well, she is on drugs. Even if he was saying it was Valium, it's still drugs. He's explaining.
She's not on mushrooms or anything.
Right. She's not on mushrooms or LSD and tripping balls right now.
No, it's just a Valium.
And she totally looks like it when
half a Valium even.
Yeah.
He says half a Valium. He's trying to tone it down so much.
I really liked, Abigail has been such a wound-up character.
She has been very
Casey Rawle is really a very versatile actress, and she does a really nice job now giving us really relaxed Abigail.
Dreamy.
Hi, Dr. Blue.
She does it really well.
And how she sees family now. So she has that moment where she closes her eyes and she opens them, and she sees terrifyingly creepy Mom Hobbs.
Yes.
And it fits in with creepy moms that we've seen so far in the episode. That dead-eyed stare that comes from knowing, okay, horrible things are happening around me and I can't do anything about it. And it almost implies to me that Garrett Jacobs Hobbs' wife had some idea what was going on.
Something was going on.
And it's just that little thing, that little implication, that little connection there. But it's really a nice little thing.
And then it gets fuzzy, and then when it comes back, it's the two of them.
So this is Hannibal's first attempt to create family in the episode, in the series, with Abigail and Alana. This is his nuclear family.
Design.
This is his design, yes.
And even Alana had mentioned, were you expecting me? And it's of course he was. He knew you were going to go look for Abigail. There must have been some indication that he was going to go look for Abigail. Yeah. She wasn't going to be there. And she'd come storming into his house.
Extremely childlike reading of Hannibal made breakfast for dinner. And her calling him Hannibal, I think, is telling too. He's not Dr. Lecter. He's not a doctor. He's not above her. He's not like all the other people. He's her friend.
Yes.
He can be trusted. It's interesting. But the last sequence of this is unexpected even for me because I didn't think it happened this early in the series.
Right.
And we meet Crawford's wife.
Yes.
And she's played by the amazing Gina Torres from Firefly.
It was so great to see her walk in.
Who's also Lawrence Fishburne's wife, which I didn't know.
I did not know that.
This is a couple. So it's this lovely little thing. And it's such a tiny moment at the end of this episode where Jack asks if it's too late for them to have kids. And the
whole
Bella
scene's really uncomfortable.
It is.
Because he's propped up in bed with his glasses on reading. You could tell their pillows are very separate, even though they're sleeping in the same bed. She comes in and he says, sort of like a hi, honey. Goes in. It's like he takes his glasses off as if in anticipation
of now they're going to hang out and talk.
And she barely even looks at him.
Yeah.
She sits down on her side of the bed with her back to him, and when she lays down in the bed, she never turns to him. She just is looking straight ahead.
Yeah. Like she can't make eye contact.
Yeah. He puts his... And you really get this... Because he hasn't really told us a whole lot other than...
We don't know anything about Jack's
all the time. We're so busy.
In that whole conversation, we don't know... We don't learn about Jack at all. And every time Hannibal asks about her, she's just busy. She works all the time.
And then you really... The frostiness and the distance. It's like... Oh, no wonder he loves having that conversation with Hannibal at the table.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel like, in the first episode we talked about how it's odd that that Jack Crawford goes and has his guys bonding time at Hannibal Lecter's house. But I feel like here...
It makes perfect sense.
Because Jack is also alienated and lonely because if he wants to maintain his sense of authority, he can't be
bond with anybody.
Will. He can't be buddies with Alana he can be buddies with Hannibal because he's not actually in charge of Hannibal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's getting everything from Hannibal that he's not getting at home. A delicious home-cooked meal and connection.
Conversation.
Yeah.
And conversation. And then when he, out of the blue, and this, I don't know if we mentioned that he has had the conversation with the boy in the car after.
We mentioned the conversation earlier.
Yeah, I believe we mentioned it earlier, where he starts talking to the boy about why did this happen.
That he's not going to go home for a long time.
And that the boy, and this is why I say a lot of the other stuff was unnecessary, because he actually says, when they figured out that it's a mother looking for children, at first they thought it was a brother looking for a brother, but it's really a mother looking for children. He tells Jack, she said they weren't my family. We had to make our own family. And they have, and he goes, then the boy then asks him, do you have a family? Because he told me that, they weren't my family.
Jack responds with, I don't have any children.
I don't have any children.
Which is really interesting.
But he doesn't necessarily answer the question about if he has a family. He could just say, yes, I have a wife, and she's my family.
I figured that was in an FBI sense of knowing exactly where the boy was going. Because
that could be.
Yeah, because we're talking about kids. And do you have family? And when he says no, I don't have any children. The boy Chris is basically, well, then you don't get it.
You don't get it.
Yeah,
you couldn't possibly.
You couldn't. Yeah, you don't know what this dynamic is like, and what it's like to have children, and how how siblings interact, and how a parent-child relationship is like. And he kind of glosses past this, and he kind of helps the kid along. I want to go home. I want you're not going to for a long time. You're going to have to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah. First, you're going to have to talk to me.
So to have him after this cold, frosty introduction to his wife. So they're sitting there, a divide between them in the bed that seems like a chasm. You kind of get this idea that, it's not, oh, honey, I'm home with a kiss and a hug and a cuddle. This next thing out of his mouth is it too late to have kids?
Right.
And all she does is roll over and tears well up in her eyes. So
it is for her.
It is for me.
But then we're left with Will's Happy Place music, Will and the Dogs. And this musical cue that is one of the most beautiful things Brian Retzel has composed for this series. And one of the most musical things. He composes a lot of stuff that's sort of not quite musical. But this Will Happy theme, the Winston theme, whatever we want to call it, is just lovely, and Will gets to hang out. And I love the shot of him with his pack all sleeping in one room. This is his family.
This is his family.
Jack may not have a family. Abigail, Hannibal, and Alana are creating a family together. Will has a family that he can interact with. Those dogs understand him to the value that he has. He can understand the dogs for what they are, their unconditional love. And as someone who is about dogs, I'm a dog guy, I completely get this. I completely get this moment and why Will embraces the stray dogs. He feels like he is a stray dog. He can interact with them. They love him. He loves them. It's simple.
There's also a genuine interaction with dogs.
Yeah.
That you don't get with with human beings, and they've brought this up before about people can't keep the promises that dogs do, right. And that sometimes a dog's affection and interaction is so much more genuine than a human being. I actually had a dog when I was really upset. It wasn't actually my dog. I was watching a dog for someone, and I had something happen that was devastating to me in that moment. Just took me out emotionally. I was trying to keep it together in front of everybody because I had to. I went and hid somewhere to have my little emotional meltdown and let it all out. I sat on the floor. I started bawling, and the dog came up to me. A dog that wasn't mine, but I had just cared for on occasion, and and sat in front of me and looked at me.
Yeah.
And with the paw came over and touched my lap. And was touching my leg, and I kind of came over and put his head in my face, looked after me more than a human being had that day. Yeah. So I totally get what Will is connecting with his dogs, because they do that. And to have that terribly sad moment between Jack and his wife, that there's no kids, there's a disconnection with his wife. He's a man alone at this point, about as isolated as Hannibal and Alana appear to be.
Because he's telling everyone to use the ladies' room.
Yeah.
He's telling everyone the class is dismissed.
Right.
That is Jack Crawford.
Exactly.
Sending everyone away.
And the one that seems most disconnected is the one that has found the most connection.
Will has peace.
Yes.
Will starts the series with peace.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He's found a way to survive.
Into a lack of peace. He's pulled into a world where he can't understand what's going on. And I think it's really, that really fits in with this episode, and how angry he gets about the family stuff is, it's like, if you had just left me alone,
right,
I would have been fine. You've brought me here. You've shown me this. You won't let me teach. You won't let me just be. Alana keeps coming over, and I don't understand my feelings.
You're forcing me into therapy.
I have to have someone else come over and feed my dogs, and I don't know what he's doing with my flies. What's going on?
I know. I wondered during that whole scene how much that would flip.
Oh, Will would have freaked.
There's usually people who are into that stuff, like, don't touch my stuff, man.
Yeah.
Don't touch it.
I don't believe that it's part of the show, but Will went home, saw a finished fly, knew he did not finish it.
Oh, of course.
And was thrown off.
But again, like I said, that's why a lot of this other stuff was so unnecessary, because this show leads you there. It leads you to natural conclusions. It leads you to have those scenes in your own mind. We don't always need it all laid out. And I really think a lot of the stuff in the middle, like I said, could have been, because all the heart of the meal were in those other moments about family.
Yeah.
And in that conversation in the car. And in that, how is it that this kid who just tried to, kill his family and couldn't, and the whole conversation about family with the whole show, how does this suddenly prompt, and Lawrence Fishburne is not a young man. So why, out of all this time, would it suddenly prompt him to want to have family?
Well, it reminds us of the standard. I mean, it is a very high trope that these people, these FBI guys, these trackers are married to their job. They
don't
put their lives on hold to find this, and so it's trope on one hand, but it's also a very realistic portrayal. It's not like he didn't have time to find anything. He found a wife. He found a very beautiful wife, but also found the time to disconnect over time. And really, I get the sense from this Jack Crawford, this specific Lawrence Fishburne Jack Crawford, that he throws himself into his job, period. Job is one, period.
Right. It sounds like he met somebody that's just like him, too, if she works all the time.
Yeah,
bingo.
That's very true.
Yes.
Yeah.
She can understand why I'm married to my job, because she's married to her job.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm sure in that moment...
And neither of them have had the concept of, hey, we should start a family, because, no, job is one.
Right.
Or she may have, and never broached the subject, or, figured because of his lifestyle that he would never want to. Yeah, and then that's why she was so upset. Like, why now?
Well, I'm hoping that the next episode is more to your liking, Ophelia. And I think it is.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Because I remember you getting very excited about this episode.
Ooh.
And we've been tantalizing Miko with not only, okay, this stuff is coming.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much interest in coming. But also, oh my God, all the things we learned at the San Diego Comic-Con panel.
That you can't listen to yet.
We can't
I know.
say a thing because
I've been told I am blacked out. I am
it's
not
all
allowed.
Contingent on you knowing what happens during season 2's finale, and we are a ways away from that.
We are a long way.
I'm not going to ruin that for you.
I want to give a shout out
I don't
to
care.
to the Sound on Sight podcast, who does This Is Our Design, which is the Hannibal podcast that got me into the idea of wanting to do a Hannibal podcast. They just started season 1. They did season 2 live, and now they're going back and doing season 1. So they are sort of our direct competition at the moment. So check out Sound on Sight's This Is Our Design podcast. It is wonderful. If you like us, you can email us at eattherudecast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at eattherudecast and at Hannibal Podcast. Thank you, ladies, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us at the table. We'll see you next week.
What's next week's title? I love that.